Do you think you know all the states with no sales tax? I'll bet you've got it wrong. I'm not trying to be nasty, but many of these so-called no sales tax states have found clever ways to collect what amounts to sales tax revenue, and they can sneak up on you without warning. In this piece, we'll take a look at the 5 states that advertise as having no sales tax and show you how they still manage to get their mangy hands on your and your company's hard-earned money. Make sure you stick around until the end when we break the one myth about the one way folks that think that they can save on sales tax that absolutely does not work. Sorry, guys. Hey, guys, I'm Mary Schaefer, founder of AP Now, your one-stop shop for cutting-edge business intelligence if you work in, manage, or have responsibility for the accounts payable and or payment function. So let's take a look at the 5 states that supposedly have no sales tax and see what's going on. Very technically, they are correct. When you see what they are doing, you'll probably agree with me. Effectively, they are charging sales tax. You know that old saying, a rose by any other name. Okay, let's start with Alaska. Alaska has no statewide sales tax, but, and this is a biggie, you might have local tax, which can range anywhere from 1 to 7%, with the average being in the 2 to 5% range, okay? So no state sales tax, but local sales tax. Like almost every other state, they have lodging tax. And as we go through this, you'll see we'll talk about that. And lastly, both liquor and tobacco are taxed. Let's move on to Delaware. Delaware is a state that I'm very familiar with because right now we live in Delaware. So Delaware also has no sales tax, and there's no local tax, at least to the best of my knowledge. But when you're purchasing a car, they have what they call a document fee. And that document fee is 4.25% of the purchase price of the car. And in fact, when you go shopping for it, you'll see some of the sales folks even refer to it as sales tax. Now, to be fair to the state of Delaware, when you sell a car, you get the remainder value of that tax, that document fee back. So it's not a complete loss, but yes, it is. Okay, next thing, buying or selling a house. Like many other states, Delaware has a transfer tax. In this case, it's 4%, 2% payable by the buyer, 2% by the seller. And lastly, they have a lodging or occupancy tax. It's 8%, which might sound high if you're comparing it to sales tax, but it's not high when you consider other states and cities' lodging tax. I think New York City is 15% now. Okay, moving on. Montana. Montana doesn't have a sales tax, but the state does tax things like gasoline, alcohol, tobacco, lodging, and a few other items. And certain towns, although they don't have sales tax, have a resort tax. And they are, for the most part, what you think, where there are resorts. Okay, let's move on to New Hampshire. New Hampshire has an 8.5% tax on restaurants and prepared food that is consumed on premises. So no sales tax per se, but if you're eating out in a restaurant, you can expect to have this restaurant tax. They also have a food and lodging tax, and they have a tax on car rentals. Lastly, I want to move on to the state of Oregon has a lodging tax. It's 1.5% plus whatever the local tax is. So, for example, if you're in Portland, Oregon, the tax is 11.5%, the lodging tax, if you will. Now, Oregon does not have sales tax, but and this is kind of an interesting one. This is the first time I'd heard of it, although I'm sure it's the same in other states. Recreational pot is taxed at 17% plus up to 3% at the local level, although medical marijuana is usually tax exempt both at the state and the local levels. Now, before we get to that big mistake that many, many folks make, whether they're in a no sales tax state or a state that does charge sales tax, before we get to that, I'd like to share that we have over 350 videos in our library on the AP Now channel with new AP and payment videos being aired every Tuesday and Thursday, and we've got many shorts on other days. Occasionally on Saturdays, we also like to have a little Wordle fun. So please check out the channel after, I'm saying after, you finish watching this one. Now, you may have noticed that the way states get around the sales tax issue is they sometimes call it something else, okay? That's not what's going to go on with what I call the big mistake. The big mistake comes when somebody in a state that charges sales tax buys a car and they think they'll buy it in the no sales tax state, and that way they will avoid paying sales tax. The reality is, when you go to register the car, the state will catch you and they will demand their sales tax. You can try, but the odds of getting caught are quite high. I know of one case where a guy bought a car. Then he got offered a new job after the purchase of the car, right after that, and then he took the job and he moved. And to his utter amazement, when he went to register or re-register his car in the new state, they took one look at the purchase date and they said, "Sorry, buddy," and they had their hand out. You know what happened. These are not the only misconceptions that abound in the accounting and finance space. One of the things we try to do on this channel is debunk common misconceptions, along with best practices and fraud and all that other stuff. That's why we recently did a short video on 8 accounting misconceptions about accounts payable. You can watch it right now using the link that will appear on your screen on YouTube and is in the show notes below. As always, we appreciate your thumbs up, your shares, your subscribes, and your comments.